Do you have Phillips Hue sensors or light bulbs in your home? Would you like greater control over your smart home? Well, did you know that there's an API that will allow you to access and control your light bulbs? And did you also know that there are temperature sensors inside the motion sensors? I'm going to show you how you can turn the light bulbs on and off from your computer. I'm also going to show you how to change the brightness. And finally, I'm going to show you how to access the temperature from your motion sensor. And we'll even have the motion sensor send a text message to our cell phone with the temp. In order for you to recreate what I'm doing here, I'm operating under some general assumptions. For one, that you've already set up your Hue hub and that your light bulb is plugged in, your motion sensor has batteries in it, and that they're both registered on the Hue network. If you haven't already done that, it's really easy to do. I'm gonna pull up my Hue app here for you so you can see what I'm looking at. And in my Hue app here, I've got my lights. So the basement YouTube studio, that's the light that I'm gonna be working with, turning on and off with some code today. And in accessories, you can see the motion sensors that I have in my house, and the basement sensor is the one that I'm going to be working with. So if you haven't already put your motion sensor and your light that you want to work with onto the Hue network, go ahead and do that now. If you don't know how to do that, it's really easy. In the home screen, just click on these three dots up top here, and then you can add lights or whatever else you want to add. If you have any problems or questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. All right, so after you do that, you're going to want to go to developers.meethue.com/login and create a developer account. After you create your login, it should bring you into this Get Started page. If it doesn't bring you there, then go ahead and navigate to this link. It will give you a couple of tips to get started. So there's a couple of steps you need to go through first. You need to make sure your bridge is connected to the network and is functioning properly. You want to test the smartphone app that you just set up in the previous step, and you can control the lights with your phone before we try to do it with code. Then you need to discover the IP address of the bridge on your network. So there are 4 ways to get the IP address of your Hue hub. The first one is to use a discovery app or a third-party app. I tend to prefer Advanced IP Scanner. I've used it a bunch in the past for various projects. I think it's pretty cool, pretty neat. You can just download it. It's just called Advanced IP Scanner. When you download it, you'll simply open it up and click scan, and it will list all of the devices that are in your network. From there, you'll just look for manufacturer, you'll look for Phillips Hue, and you'll have to do a little bit of deductive reasoning because your light bulbs will be on there as well. So you have to figure out which one is the hub. So that's one way. Another way would be to use the broker server discover. And that's located here at discovery.meethue.com. It's really a powerful tool, and I think this is probably one of the easiest ways. This is assuming that you're already logged into the Hue cloud. Otherwise, this will not work. You'll get an error there. In my case, I logged in and I went to this website and it pulls up my Hue hub. In my case, 192.168.1.144. So that's really easy. A third way to do it would be to use the Hue app. And I'll pull up my Hue app here. So this is my cell phone. In settings, you're going to go to My Hue System, and then where it says Phillips Hue, just click on that that little information piece on the right. Click on that, and then you'll see the status. It's connected, and you can see the IP address on the bottom. Again, you'll note that it's 192.168.1.144. So the fourth way to do it is to look into your wireless router and look up in the DHCP table. That is a little more complicated, so I'm not going to walk through that way, but you've got 3 solid avenues for which you can find your IP address. So once you have your IP address, you can then move on to the next piece, which is using the clip debugger. That is located here at https://your bridge IP address /debug/clip.html. And from there, it'll look just like this. And when you use this debugger, you can populate all of the components of the HTTPS call that you want to make. So I've already done that here. I've popped that into my URL. So you see here that I have my IP address, /debug/clip.html. And now I can begin sending test commands in using my web browser and the clip debugger. The problem though is that we're going to get an error. We expect to get an error on the first time that we send. So for the first command, let's try this /API/new developer and see what kind of response we get. And this will be a post. And we get this error here, this unauthorized user. The reason that we get this unauthorized user is that even though we've sent our first command, we are not yet an authorized user. The way that we become an authorized user is that we have to press the button on the Hue hub, the physical hub itself, in order to allow us to get a username. So what that looks like here is on the Hue hub itself, you should have something that looks like this. This inside the blue ring, it should say Phillips. You press that button. Okay. Now, when you come back and we are ready to send our next command, we'll just change this out to be API. And again, this is a post command. It'll provide us our username. And I'm not going to go press my button because I've already got my username. So this is going to be a slightly different response than what you get. As soon as you press the button and you come back and you do /API, at that point, you should get a success message and it should say username. It should look like this very long string of alphanumeric characters. That username, that is going to be the crucial piece that we need when we write our code. So if you've gotten to this part, then congratulations, you've made yourself an authorized user and we can now move on to the next phase. If not, then something has gone wrong. Drop a comment or any questions that you have below in the chat and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So let me know if you need any assistance. But I'm operating under the assumption that you've got your username, so I'm going to move forward. Cool, now let's do the fun stuff. Let's get all of our lights, and we can do that by grabbing this URL address here, and this is going to go here. We need to change out our bridge IP address that we determined in a previous step. For me, it's 192.168.1.144. And then you also need to change out your user ID here. And there's really no harm in sharing this. For one, I'm going to delete it anyways. And two, it's within my local network, so there's really nothing anybody can do with it. So this is going to be a get command. And you'll see there's a huge amount of data that comes back. So this is everything that's in the Hue cloud for me right now. And I've got a ton of lights, motion sensors, a whole bunch of stuff on the Hue network. So that's why there's a lot here for me. What I want to do is figure out what number my basement light is, because my basement light, you can't see it now, I'm going to show you in a second, it's right above me. This is the one that I'm going to turn on and off, toggle on and off with some code. So I need to figure out which number it is. If you'll notice, this is a JSON structured response here, and the first one, item 2, whatever you want to call it, bulb 2, not sure what the correct term is, but number 2. Is it on? No, that's false. The brightness is set at 254. Is it reachable and on the network? That's true. Then the next one, number 5. Is it on? No, false. Is it reachable? False. So I must have taken this off the network at some point. Not a big deal. But the key here is that I want to get the number of the bulb for my basement in my studio down here so that I can access it, so I can turn it on and off. And in this case, I already know, because I've done a little bit of work beforehand, I know that this is number 17. So you'll have to experiment and you'll have to play around with the commands, try turning it on and off, and if it does, if it works the way that you want, congratulations, you found the right number. And if it doesn't, go on to the next one. The numbers are over here. You have to scroll down a little bit. Number 5, number 13, number 15. So let's go back to the documentation here. And the way that we do it is with this URL. So it's going to be HTTPS, your IP address for your Hue hub, / API, / your username, / lights, / this number of the bulb that you're trying to change the state of. Okay. So let me go back to my clip tool here. So you'll see that I already have that. So HTTPS, my IP address, / API, / my username, / lights, / 17. Now I can click get, and you can see the detailed information that comes back for light bulb 17 here. My state is on. That's true. It's set at a brightness of 254. Is it reachable? Obviously it's true because it's on. And there's some other information here about that light bulb specifically. So cool. We have exactly what we want in this case. So now I've gotten the information about it, but I would like to change the state of this light bulb. And to do that, we need to modify, we need to do two things here. We need to modify our URL slightly, and we also need to pass in a body, and then our method will be put. So back in my clip tool here, go to the end, so lights / 17 / state. And then we need to pass in a body in our message. And this is going to be the put method here. And let me share my other camera. So in a second, I'm going to turn this light off by modifying the body to be on false. And this is going to be a put command. So when I click put, this light should turn off. And it did. Success. Now I can change this to be true. And when I click put again, you'll notice that this light turns back on. There we go. So mission accomplished so far. All right, moving on to the next piece. We can also change the brightness and the saturation of the lights in addition to turning it on and off. So the URL is the same. It's lights / 1 / state. Only the body changes here a little bit. So go back to my clip tool. So I'm going to make sure that this is on, and the brightness and the saturation is both 254. In this case, I'm going to turn the brightness down to, 20. The brightness goes from 1 to 255. When I first started, I couldn't figure out why I wasn't doing what I wanted, because I thought the brightness went from 1 to 100 because it was a percentage. It's not. It's 1 to 255, which cleared up quite a bit of confusion for me. So I'm going to turn this brightness down here. I'm going to click put, and this should dim this bulb, and it does. I'm going to turn this back up to 255, and I'm going to change the saturation here to 1, and I'll click put. Changes it. You can change the hue. If this was a colored bulb, I think that would change the color, but since this is just a regular white bulb, it isn't going to do anything in this instance, so no need to mess with it here. Turn the saturation back up. All right, that's pretty much it, interacting with the state attributes. There's quite a bit more you can do with these bulbs, but I am going to not do that because I want to move on to writing some code and doing this outside of the clip debugger, but instead over in my my IDE. I'm going to be writing this with some Python. So if you already have your Python environment set up, you can follow along. And I'm going to write just a few lines of code. It's really, really simple, actually. There's not too much to this. So I'm going to do a couple import statements here. I'm going to import URL lib.request. And then I'm going to import SSL, and I'm also going to import my module that I wrote, Twilio API key. This is going to vary for you. This is simply a little script I wrote to store all my my API keys, credentials, and everything, so that I don't inadvertently expose them when I'm presenting in a video. So that is going to look a little different for you. You'll at least have the top 2 import statements there. I'll call this my Hue username. I'll call this my lights data, because this is going to be the URL where I am pulling back the state and the data about my light bulb that I'm looking at. And you can get this directly from the clip debugger. So this is should all look very familiar. Lights data out to my lights 17 there. And that is a text string, of course. And then light on or off. That will be the full text string here of the state, including the state, I should say. And here's where we want to use our SSL, HTTPS context, unverified context. Now here is where we put the piece of the code that will actually do the turning on and off, that will tell the cloud what it is that we want to accomplish. So this is where we change the state of the light bulbs. And then we can change the bright. And this is instead BRI. We'll call that bright. And then call this our req dot request. And we're going to say our URL is going to equal light on or off, and the data, the method, will equal put with, pass in what we just defined in REQ, light. And we could just iterate through all the bulbs if we wanted to. And then let's go ahead and print light dot status. All right, now that we've got our code written, I'm going to pull up my laptop camera here so we can see. I'm going to execute this code, and this light bulb should turn off. Oh, and I got a 200 response, so I have typed something incorrectly. Ah, I see what it is. I have an extra quotation mark there. Let me try this again. Perfect. So executing this code right here turned this light bulb overhead off. Let me turn this back on by changing this statement to be true. And that turned it back on. And to modify the brightness, in addition to changing the bright here, I also need to change my data. So instead of saying data equals data, I'm going to say data equals bright. So now if I execute this, this should dim the bulb significantly. And it did. Perfect. Let me turn this back up to 255, or maximum brightness. There we go. Perfect. Now we've got some very simple code that will allow us to programmatically change the state of our light bulb. Very cool. So let's move on to the next piece. Okay, so the next part that I want to talk about is how to get the temperature out of the Hue motion sensor. You should already have one of these installed into your network. If you don't, make sure that you get that done. But do me a favor, if you like these videos, please do me a favor, subscribe to this channel. I'd really appreciate it. We actually just broke 5,000 subscribers a few days ago, so the channel is growing pretty quickly, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate you. So do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to this channel, drop any questions that you might have down below. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. All right, so the Phillips Hue motion sensor, these things are really cool. They can tell when motion is going on in your house. You can set them to turn the lights on when you walk into a room. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do with it. But one thing that most people don't know is that you can get the temperature out of these. And the only way that you can do that currently is not with the app, but you can do that with code. Let's see how we can get this to send us the temperature. So in my code editor here, I've got a fresh tab. So we're going to need to do some import statements. And just like the previous script, we're going to have to import URL lib dot request import URL open as urec, and then import BS4 because we're going to use beautiful soup. Import beautiful soup as soup. Import SSL because we're using a secure socket layer. Import JSON because that's the structure of the data that we'll be pulling back. We're going to import Twilio here. Import Twilio, REST, import client. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why in the heck would we want to import Twilio here? Well, that's because we're going to have this send us a text message with the temperature. So let's see how we can do that. And then import Twilio API key. Now this last statement is going to be a little different for you. You're not going to need this. I just created this, as I mentioned a little bit ago in the video, because I want to keep my keys over here so that I'm not putting my keys out there in the video for everyone to see, because that would be a very bad thing. You'll just paste your keys directly into this tab because you won't be sharing it with everyone. So let's do our account SID for Twilio. We're going to say that equals Twilio API key dot account SID. And my auth token equals Twilio API key dot auth token. All right. And then the next, we're going to want to pass in our Hue username and the sensor that we want to work with. So I'm going to say my Hue username equals Twilio API key, because I've pasted my Hue username into that script. And my sensor data is, make this an F string because I love F strings. HTTPS. My IP address 192.168.1.144. Again, this is the IP address of my Hue hub, not the IP address of my sensor. API, and then I'm going to say this is my Hue username. Sensors And I know that my sensor is item 14 because I know that I've done that in the same way that I identified my bulb previously. So I used the clip editor to find my sensor, the one that I wanted to work with. If you have any questions, drop that in the chat below. That might be a little confusing. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. Now I want to verify my SSL certificate. And I'm going to do that in the exact same way that I did this. So I'm just going to copy and paste this from my previous script and paste that there. No need to type code twice if I do not have to. Now I want to create a Hue client. So I'll just call this Hue client equals Hue rec. And I'm going to pass in my sensor data. The sensor data details. I'm going to say my page HTML is equal to my uClient dot read. And once I'm done with that information, then I want to close the channel. Now, I want to parse the JSON data that's coming back using Beautiful Soup. So I'll just say page soup is equal to soup. Pass in my page HTML, and then I'll use the HTML parser. Oops, dot parser would be correct. All right, and parser equals JSON dot loads and page HTML Celsius equals parser state and the temperature. There we go. Now, when you first see this, you're going to get back a weird number for your temperature. What it is actually Celsius, but it's got several extra digits on it because there's no decimal. It looks kind of funny. So we're going to want to do a couple things. Round and convert this to Fahrenheit. Obviously, if you are familiar with Celsius and you want to keep it as Celsius, you don't need to use this step. You can skip this. But I want to translate this a bit, so I'm going to write a simple function here. So I'm going to define my C to F conversion. And I'll pass in Celsius. Then I will say that Celsius equals Celsius divided by 100. Oops. Then I will say T equals Celsius times 1.8 plus 32. We'll return T, return my temperature, and print T. Now this is nothing more here than the simple conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Nothing special, nothing fancy. Now I want to round the temperature. So I'm going to say Fahrenheit equals round and finally, once I have my Fahrenheit temperature, I want to pass that into a text message that we will use the Twilio client to send. So client dot messages dot create, and I will say 2 equals Twilio API key dot my cell phone, and from equals Twilio dot API key dot the Twilio number that I have purchased. If you're not familiar with how to set up a Twilio account and get your API keys and buy a number and provision everything for that number and then use that number in one of your projects, let me know. I'm more than happy to walk anybody through that. It's actually really quick and easy. Twilio is pretty awesome, pretty easy to use. And the body, I'm just going to say the temperature in the basement is, and I'm going to convert this to string, and I'm going to say, or pass in my value for Fahrenheit. Looks like I have an error here. Invalid syntax from, oh, because I wrote import twice. This should be from URL lib dot request import URL open as urec. And I did the same thing here, so I need to change that to from BS4 import beautiful soup as soup. And I have an error here. It's a syntax error. Oh, goofy syntax. There we go. 0 from CS, comma, round to 0 decimals. There we go. And I have another syntax error here. From, oh, yeah. You have to do from underscore equals Twilio API key dot Twilio number. All right. And, oh, duh. I forgot to actually create client credentials here. So I need to say client equals client and account SID and auth token. There we go. And Celsius equals parser. Okay. Yeah, it's always kind of dicey when you're just typing code from off the top of your head. Sometimes you forget things and you make silly syntax errors, but I think all of those are now resolved. So let's go ahead and execute this script and see what kind of a text message we get on our phone. And with any luck, our temperature sensor, our motion sensor, should text message us the temperature. And it did. The temperature in my basement YouTube studio is 67 degrees Fahrenheit. It's only about 40 lines of code to get the temperature from your Phillips Hue motion sensor. So that's it for me, guys. Really appreciate your time. A couple of thoughts. We went through today how to extract the temperature from your motion sensor, how to control the state, whether your lights are on or off, how to control the brightness. And there's a whole lot more that you can do with it if you really dig in and take the time to play with it. And don't even get me started if your light bulbs, your Hue bulbs are color. Man, you can change the colors. You can change the colors based on the season. You can do pretty much anything that you like. It's really wild. The Hue API is really powerful. So thank you so much. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and drop any questions, comments, or concerns you have down below. Other than that, thanks so much. Talk to you next time.